So why are we here? You know, from time to time, critically important that we step back from who we are and where we are and what we're doing, take another look at who we are and where we are and what we're doing. If we don't do that, we tend to get caught up in our own little worlds, and that is a very, very dangerous place to be. Those of you who manage people in the workplace, one of the things you're constantly trying to do with the people you manage is draw them out of their own little world. Yes or yes? Yeah, and those of you who have kids, one of the things you're constantly trying to do with your kids is draw them out of their own little world. And God's always trying to do the same thing for us. Because we do get caught up in our own little worlds, and the reason that's so dangerous is because the way we see the world determines the way we live our lives. The way we see the world determines the way we live our lives. How do you see the world? What's your worldview? There are almost 7 billion people on the planet now, and if we reduce the world's population to 100 people, proportionally, 57 of those 100 people would come from Asia, 21 from Europe, 14 from North and South America, and 8 from Africa. 51 would be women, 49 would be men, 68 of those 100 people wouldn't be able to read and write. How do you see the world? Because majority of the people on the planet still can't read and write. 6 of those 100 people would own or control more than 50% of the world's wealth. 5 of those 6 people would be US citizens. 3 of those 5 people would live on the same street on the North Shore of Long Island. How do you see the world? One of those 100 people would have just been born, one of those 100 people would be just about to die, and only one of those 100 people would have been to college. How do you see the world? Maybe in your world, everyone goes to college, but on planet Earth, 1 in 100 people have a college experience. 1/3 of the world's population is dying from lack of bread. 1/3 of the world's population is dying from lack of justice, and 1/3 of the world's population is dying from overeating. How was breakfast? How do you see the world? Because the way we see the world determines the way we live our lives. And every time we encounter God in any genuine way, He challenges our worldview. Every time we encounter God in any genuine way, He reminds us of 2 simple realities. People were made to be loved, and things were made to be used. Too often we love things and we use people. And every time we encounter God, every time we hear the gospel, we're challenged to put our worldview back in order. We're challenged to put our priorities and our perspective back in order. And one of the reasons it's important that we have events like this is because they encourage us or challenge us or force us to step back from who we are and where we are and what we're doing and take another look at who we are and where we are and what we're doing. And that's powerful and that's important. It has been a tough time to be Catholic in America the past several years. Yes or yes? A lot of tragedy and all of that. Sufferings of the victims and their families is a tragedy. The cover-up, the scandal, the lawsuits are a tragedy. The way the priesthood has been tarnished is a tragedy. A great many tragedies in the midst of all of this, but I think there are a couple of tragedies that we have overlooked. I think there are a couple of tragedies that we need to address. The first is that I think essentially as Catholics, we have forgotten our story. And worse than that, we're allowing the anti-Catholic American media to tell our story for us. And they've got people convinced that Catholicism is about a handful of priests who don't know what it means to be a priest. And that's not Catholicism. There are 1.2 billion There are 1.2 billion Catholics on the planet. That's Catholicism. There are 67 million Catholics in America alone. And whenever we start throwing the big numbers around, it's always important that we put those big numbers in perspective. So let's do that. There are 67 million Catholics in America. How many people does it take to elect an American president? 51 million. It takes 51 million people to elect an American president. How many Catholics in America? 67 million Catholics in America, 1.2 billion Catholics on the planet, the largest faith community on earth. And every single day, the Catholic Church feeds more people, houses more people, clothes more people, visits more imprisoned people, takes care of more sick people, and educates more people than any other institution on the planet Earth could ever hope to. We've forgotten our story. Let me ask you a question. When Jesus was alive, where were the sick people? They were in hospitals, right? First thing Jesus did when he came to the village, he said, "Take me to the hospital. I want to cure some sick people." No, there's never any such thing as a hospital. Everything that's good about modern healthcare emerged through the church, emerged through the religious orders. Let me ask you another question. Raise your hand if your parents are nobility. Kings, queens, dukes, earls, duchesses, knights. Wouldn't be a single educated person here today if it wasn't for the Catholic Church. Prior to the church's introduction of education for the masses, people like you and I never got an education. It was only ever for the nobility. We have forgotten our story. For 2,000 years, wherever you find Catholics, you find a group of people making phenomenal contributions to their local community and to their national community. Is our past without blemish? Absolutely not. Why? Because the church is made up of people like you and me. Will our future be without blemish? Absolutely not. Let's face it, there are no perfect churches, no perfect parishes. You find a perfect church, you go ahead and join it. It won't be perfect anymore. Yeah. There you go with that clapping again. What am I going to do with you people? It's a tragedy. We've forgotten our story, but I don't think that's the greatest tragedy. I think there's one greater tragedy, and that is if you took a poll on the streets of America tomorrow and you asked people to give you 5 words to describe Catholics, I suspect less than 10% of them would use the words prayerful or spiritual. That's the heart of the crisis. We're no longer considered a spiritual people. No longer considered a spiritual people. And if we ever wish to be taken seriously ever again in the history of humanity, we've got to get back to our spirituality. Problem is, most people think Catholicism's irrelevant. Most people think Catholicism's irrelevant. We've got to ask the bold question, is Catholicism still relevant? Because if it isn't, we should pack it up. If it is, we have to find ways to demonstrate its relevance in a modern context. If Catholicism is still deeply relevant to people's modern lives, we've got to find a way to demonstrate its relevance, and we've got to do it in ways that are bold and brilliant, articulate, inspiring. We've got to get the message out there, and we're not doing a great job of that. You know, I've been traveling the world for 18 years now and speaking and writing, and my staff really challenged me, and my board really challenged me about 5 years ago. They said, we got to do this on a different scale. We got to do this in a different way. Sending you out on the road isn't the solution. And then they came to me with 2 ideas. The first was the website idea, which is dynamiccatholic.com. Do we need some more dynamic Catholics? Yeah, I think so. And we just launched the beta site. If you haven't checked it out yet, check that out, dynamiccatholic.com. And I thought this would be a great tool to get the message out, to get people inspired. And I wasn't surprised that that has been as successful as it already is in its early days. The thing that surprised me was their second idea. They came to me with an idea. They said, I published a book in 2001 called Rediscovering Catholicism, and between 2001 and 2009, it spent 400 weeks on the bestseller list. And they came to me and they said, this is great, but how many people are going to go out and spend $22.95 for a book? And the people who are spending $22.95 for the book, they're probably not really the ones who need it. We got to get some mass distribution on this book. I said, well, what do you have in mind? They said, we should print a $2 edition. I said, all right, that's a good idea, $2 edition. Paperback, put together a $2 edition. I said, that's fine. And we went out and we got some funding for about 50,000 copies. And this was in the fall of 2008. And they said, let's do some different ways to pass them out. We'll give them out at retreat centers. We'll give them to some youth groups. We'll give them to some schools, some colleges. And the last idea they had was to take 2 parishes, and they took 2 parishes in Atlanta. And they said, let's give a copy to everybody who leaves Mass on Christmas Day in these 2 parishes. I said, well, what's the point of that? They said, well, it's nice. I said, yeah, it's nice. I said, what's the other point? They said 38% of people in a Catholic church on Christmas Day, it's the only time they go to church each year. What does that mean? It's our only opportunity to re-engage them. It's the only time we see them every year, and every year they come and go. And nothing's changed. We got to do something about that. So, needless to say, the most successful pilot of passing these books around was in these churches on Christmas Day. Phenomenal responses. We start getting emails. This book brought me back to the church. This book brought my husband back to the church. This book brought my son back to the church. I mean, just incredible things start to happen. So last year, we made these books available, $2 a copy. Any parish that wanted them, as many as they wanted to give away on Christmas Day. We shipped 330,000 copies last Christmas. This year we hope to ship 1 million copies for Christmas Day. We put a little business reply card in the book that tells people, if you like the book, you can get another 6 copies for $10. Just visit dynamiccatholic.com. Shipping 10,000 copies a week. What's that? Evangelization. What did we create? We created a process to re-engage people on Christmas Day. We create a process for evangelization, and it's simple. People give someone a book. Why do I tell you this? The tide on American Catholicism is going out. I say it again. The tide on American Catholicism is going out. And when 70% of Catholics don't come to church on Sunday, isn't it time somebody did something? And business as usual is not going to get the job done. And as a church, we're in a state of business as usual. We got to do something bold. We got to do something bold. We've got to get out ahead of it. And it's your job and my job to make that happen. But before we get into all of that, before we go out and say, yeah, I'm going to get those books for my parish this Christmas, we got to get back to our spirituality. I just want to talk to you about 2 things today. I make my living as a business consultant. I have 3 partners, and we have a boutique consulting firm in Chicago. And I work 4 days a month with them. I got to tell you, I work 4 days a month with them. That's how I make my living. Spend the rest of my time working in churches and schools, and that's my ministry. My partners and I, we have 43 Fortune 500 clients. We have 27 Fortune 100 clients, working with some of the best companies in the world. And you know what I discover about the best companies in the world? They got 2 things. They are hungry for best practices, and they are committed to continuous learning. And I'd like to see an awful lot more of that in our church. Yes or yes? Yeah, we got to get hungry for best practices. We got to get committed to continuous learning. And I want to talk to you about 2 ways we should be doing that on a regular basis. 2 ways we should. Number 1, confession. I know what people say, I know what people think, I know all the excuses, and I don't buy any of it. People say, well, I can't go to confession to my priest. I say, why not? They say, he knows me. I say, well, I thought that was the idea. They say, no, if he knew my sins, he would never talk to me ever again. Don't kid yourself, you're not that original. I said, well, can't you go behind the screen? They say, even if I go behind the screen, he knows what my voice sounds like. Well, try confessing in an Australian accent. Besides, you think about it, when you go to the doctor, every time you go to the doctor, you want to go to a different doctor, right? You want to go to a different doctor every time you go to the doctor, don't you? No, of course you don't. Which doctor you want to go to? You want to go to your doctor. Why? Your doctor knows you better. Because your doctor knows your history, he's able to serve you better. The same thing with confession. Same thing with confession. Here's the thing. Nobody competes at a high level in anything without coaching. I'll say it again. Nobody competes at a high level at anything without coaching. In the last 40 years, 10 Summer Olympic Games, only 1 athlete has gone to the Summer Olympics without a coach, and he didn't win anything. Nobody competes at a high level at anything without coaching. Where are you getting your spiritual coaching from? Because you're not going to play at a high level unless you get some great spiritual coaching. We've got to get that spiritual coaching. And confession's part of that. Confession's part of that. Of course, we have a culture out there that says sin and evil don't exist. They were invented by the church to control people. If you believe that, go home tonight, watch your 10 o'clock news. Having watched your 10 o'clock news tonight, if you still believe sin and evil don't exist, seek professional help. And I guess it would be nice if we could gather up all the evil people and put them on one island, Gather up all the evil people, put them on one island. Just let them self-destruct. Problem is that doesn't work. They tried that once. Yeah. Down in Australia. A reason we can't gather up all the evil people and put them on one island and let them self-destruct is because the line that separates good from evil is not out there somewhere. The line that separates good from evil is cast down the center of my heart and the center of your heart. The battle isn't out there, the battle's in here. And it would be nice, I guess. Well, I got a lot of friends, Catholic and non-Catholics, who say to me things like, well, I don't need to go to confession to a priest. I say, well, why not? They say, because me and Jesus are mates, we're buddies, we're friends, we're close, we're tight. I tell Jesus my sins, and he forgives me. He's a nice guy. It's a lovely idea, isn't it? The only problem with that one is it doesn't work. You know why it doesn't work? Because you and I, we're human beings, and as human beings, we have a phenomenal ability to deceive ourselves. Yes or yes? Yes. We can convince ourselves of all sorts of crazy stuff. That's why the me and Jesus thing doesn't work. That's why Jesus didn't set up that way to begin with. Because you know what happens after a while with that thing? After a while, we start to create God in our image. Think about the dangers. After a while, rather than being created in God's image, we start to create God in our image in the little world of our own mind. Phenomenally dangerous. That's why Jesus didn't set up that way to begin with. That's why Jesus didn't set up that way to begin with. You see, there's genius in Catholicism. Got to delve into it a little bit. Think of it like this, God has this incredible dream for us to become the best version of ourselves. He wants you to become the best version of yourself. And essentially, life is about saying yes to the things that help you become the best version of yourself and no to the things that don't help you become the best version of yourself. It's not more complicated than that. Of course, we complicate it a lot more than that, but in essence, that's what we're talking about. But the truth is, every single day, every single one of us, we do things that stop us from becoming the best version of ourselves. Yes or yes? Yeah. Then we carry all that stuff around with us. And if you think you can carry all that stuff around with you and it's not affecting you, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, and psychologically, you're the king of La La Land. It's affecting us. It's affecting our marriages. It's affecting our careers. It's affecting our businesses. It's affecting our spirituality. It's affecting our health. It's affecting everything. God in his infinite wisdom says, these people are going to mess this deal up. I got to give them an outlet. I got to give them a way to be healed. I got to give them a way to be made whole. There's tiny part of the genius of Catholicism. You see, think about it like this. Anyone play golf? You play golf? Yeah, a few people play golf. That's good. Anybody ever had their golf swing videotaped? Yeah, you had your golf swing videotaped? When you got the videotape back, did it look like what you thought it would look like? Of course it didn't. You get this DVD back of your golf swing, you think, whose body? Whose golf swing? Why? We almost never see things as they really are. Half the time when I come to confession, I need the priest to say, Matthew, you're being too hard on yourself. The other half the time, I need the priest to say, Matthew, you're being too easy on yourself. I never see things as they really are. We all think we've got 20/20 vision, socially, politically, economically. In our relationships, we all think we've got 20/20 vision. We don't. We almost never see things as they really are. That's the genius. That's the genius of confession. I'll give you another way to think about it. How many people drive a car? You drive a car? Anybody drive a car? Gee, that's more than golf. Raise your hand if you haven't washed your car. Literally, if you haven't washed your car in the last 10 years. See? Deceiving themselves. That's what I'm talking about right there. Now, we like to wash our car every 10 years or 5 years or so, and when you get your car washed, you're pretty happy about that, aren't you? You get your car washed, it's all clean on the inside, it's all clean on the outside. You just feel differently. Yes or yes? It could be the biggest piece of trash in the state of Michigan, but it's clean. You just feel differently. It's only a car, but you feel differently. It doesn't have any wheels, but it's clean. You get your car washed, you feel pretty good about that. You feel differently. You're driving down the road, you just got your car washed. What do you pray? You pray it doesn't rain, you just got your car washed. Like God doesn't have better things to worry about. You have 50,000 people dying in Africa every day from extreme poverty and preventable disease, but you just got your $6 car wash and you want that at the top of his list. Yeah, we're not selfish. We're not self-centered, are we? Anyway, God answers your prayer, it doesn't rain. But the next day you're driving down the road, there's a big pile of mud in the middle of the road. What do? You go around it, you just got your car washed. A couple of days after that, you're going somewhere, you think it might get cold, I better take a jacket. Turns out you don't need the jacket, so you say to yourself, I'll put this jacket neatly on the back seat. I'll get it later. Do you get it later? No. A couple of days after that, you're going somewhere, you think I better eat. I'm not going to have time to eat, so you eat, or you're driving, or you're on your cell phone steering with your knees. You get done with the food, you say, I'll put this food back in the bag, I crunch it up real tight. I won't put this trash on the back seat because I just got my car washed. I'll put this trash neatly on the floor in the back seat. I'll get it later. Do you get it later? No. A couple of days after that, another little bit of junk. A couple of days after that, another little bit of trash. Before you know it, it's Sunday and you're coming home from church, and what have you got now? That's right, you got the bulletin, don't you? You got the bulletin, which you probably read while Father was giving his homily, didn't you? Yeah. You think he doesn't see that? He sees you reading that bulletin. They see everything from up there. And then you come out of church, you say, hi, Father, how are you this week? You know what he's thinking? Bulletin reader. Yeah. Anyway, you think to yourself, I've already read this thing, I'll chuck it back there, I'll get it later. Do you get it later? No. A couple of days after that, another little bit of junk. A couple of days after that, another little bit of trash. Before you know it, you're throwing big bits of trash back there. You know why? Because a big bit of trash doesn't look that bad amongst all those little bits of trash, now does it? We lose our sensitivity to sin in exactly the same way. Because after a while, a big self-destructive behavior doesn't look that bad amongst all those little ones. That's how it works. That's how it works. I don't know, maybe we should make a rule. The only time you can get your car washed is on the way home from confession. You know? Then on Sunday morning, Father could walk around in the parking lot and assess. Sunday morning, Father could walk around in the parking lot and assess the situation. There's genius in Catholicism. We've got to start delving into it. My wife and I, we go to confession once a month. Why? We need it. Why else? It's a great spiritual discipline. We want to be continuous learners in our faith. We go the first weekend of every month. Why? Well, we used to just say we go once a month, but then 1 month became 2 months, and 2 months become 3 months. Truth is, we need the spiritual coaching. We want the spiritual coaching, and we're always grateful for it. Genius in Catholicism, we've got to start delving into it a little bit further. We want to become continuous learners. We're going to become hungry for best practices. We've got to start with ourselves. We've got to start with confession. Every journey towards something is a journey away from something, and sometimes it's just as important to know what you're journeying away from as it is to know what you're journeying towards. That's how it works. That's why confession is so important, so powerful. Haven't been in a while? Sit down with your priest. Say, hey, Father, I haven't been in a long time. They'll walk you through it. Here, the guys that are giving their whole lives to be your spiritual coaches. Here, the guys giving their whole lives to help you become all God created you to be, help you become the best version of yourself. What an opportunity. Don't miss it. Don't miss it. 2 things I want to talk to you about today. If we're going to become hungry for best practices, committed to continuous learning in our own lives, in our own spirituality, 2 things. Number 1, confession. Go once a month for 6 months and then send me an email and tell me if that didn't change your life. Just give it a try. Just give it a try. Second thing I want to talk to you about is the Mass. You know, the most common thing we hear said about the Mass is what? It's boring. You know, since we put Dynamic Catholic up, we got this video section. The most popular video is called, Is Mass Boring? That video is getting watched 100 times more than any other video on dynamiccatholic.com. Why? Because that's what we're dealing with as a church. We're used to hearing it from little kids. Mass is boring. I don't get anything out of it. I think the disturbing reality is more and more adults are saying Mass is boring. Kids are coming to their parents now saying, Mom, Dad, do we have to go to church? Church is boring. Parents are thinking, you know what, kid, you're right. Mass is boring. But we're going to go together and be bored. It's a family tradition. 6 generations now. We got a problem here. We've got ourselves a problem here. We don't fix this, we're done. You want a prophetic vision of the American church 20 years from now if we don't act now? Just look across the Atlantic Ocean. You got 2%, 3%, 4% attendance at church on Mass on Sunday. That's what the American church looks like 20 years from now, unless we do something now. Business as usual is not going to get it done. We need something bold. We need something bold. So we've got to get into the Mass. We've got to work that out. Got to work that out. You know, and we've been talking about it 20 years, 30 years, longer than I've been alive. Fix this, change this, new this, old that. Let me give you a summary of what 67 million Catholics sound like when they talk about the Mass. Well, the problem with the Mass, I'll tell you the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is those altar servers. Have you seen some of the shoes those altar servers wear? That's the problem with the Mass right there. It starts right there, and that's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. I don't care what sort of shoes they wear, but could we have a little bit of reverence? That's the problem with the Mass. There's no reverence anymore these days. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is we need a newer church. We need a bigger church. Oh, no, we don't need a new church, but could we get rid of those kneelers? Too old-fashioned. No, we've got to keep the kneelers, but could we get those soft, padded, cushion kneelers? That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass, we need a decent microphone system. Half the time we can't hear what Father's trying to say, and half the time we can hear what he's trying to say, we don't want to hear what he's trying to say. So that's the problem with the Mass, essentially. Couldn't we at least get a decent microphone system? That's the problem with the Mass. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the music at our church is too old-fashioned. It's stuck in the 14th century. Couldn't they at least come to the 16th century and make a little bit of progress, That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, not at our church. That's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass at our church is, they got drums, they got guitars, they got saxophones. That's the problem with the Mass. Jesus didn't have guitars. Jesus didn't have saxophones. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. I don't mind if it's old-fashioned or modern. The real problem with the Mass, the real problem with the music, the cantor. She can't sing that good to start with. Tone her down a little bit. That'd be a good start. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass, the readers. Half of them can't read, half of them can't see over the pulpit, and half of them can't pronounce half the words. And I realize that's three halves, but that points out the extent of the problem. And that is the problem with the Mass. No, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the Eucharistic ministers. Who chose those people to be Eucharistic ministers? Because let me tell you, that must be a volunteer position, because I wouldn't choose some of those people to do anything. And that's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass, our priest is too old. Just too old. He's just too old. That's the problem with the Mass. Our priest is too old. He's a nice guy and everything, but he's too old. When do they let these guys retire? 135? That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass, our priest is too young. He's just too young. What's he going to teach me about life? He should go out and live some life and then come back and teach me something about life. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is the parking lot. Where are people expected to park? You want people to come to church, but then there's nowhere for them to park. That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is that coffee they serve after Mass. Where do they get that coffee? And when do they start serving that coffee or brewing that coffee? Like Wednesday morning? Do they start brewing it Wednesday morning? That's the problem with the Mass. Oh, no, that's not the problem with the Mass. The problem with the Mass is this, on. The problem with the Mass isn't out there. The problem with the Mass isn't out there. That's why we haven't fixed it. 1,000 years from now, social scientists, philosophers will get together to characterize our age in history. And they will characterize this as the age of the abdication of responsibility. Nobody's responsible for anything anymore. It's always someone else's fault. We are the problem with the Mass. We are the problem with the Mass. But it can be fixed. It can be improved. You come through the doors of your church next Sunday, just one simple request of God. God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better version of myself this week. That's continuous learning. Imagine if every person in the church was just working on one way they could become more of who God created them to be each week. Better than that, go out and get yourself a brand new journal. Get yourself a brand new journal. Bring it home, write down to the front cover, God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better version of myself this week. A Mass journal. Because one thing I know about continuous learners? They don't go anywhere without pen and paper. They never know when the idea is going to come at them. They never know when the idea is going to strike them. Continuous learners don't go anywhere without pen and paper. Get yourself a Mass journal. Get yourself a Mass journal. I can go into my study at home, and I can take a Mass journal off the shelf for any of the last 12 years. I can take 1999 off the shelf. Can flick through it. That's what was happening in my life. That's what I was struggling with. God brought me through that. God brought me through that. Gives me hope for the future, courage for the future. Get yourself a Mass journal. Bring it home, write down the front cover. God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better version of myself this week. Then on the next page, bring it to church, write down the one thing and date it. so that you can see your journey unfolding, so that you can go back and see, yeah, that's where I was 3 years ago. I never thought I'd get through that. God brought me through that. Gives you hope and courage for the future. Get yourself a mass journal. I'll tell you what will happen, though. You go ahead and get your mass journal, won't you? Yeah. You'll take it home. You'll write down to the front cover, God, show me one way in this mass my wife can become a better version of herself this week. Oh, sorry, mistake. Sorry. You write down, God, show me one way in this mass I can become a better version of myself this week. Then you'll bring it to church with you. You bring your mass journal to mass. You'll actually be in the pews before the music starts. I know, it's a crazy idea. Radical teaching, radical idea. You'll actually be in the pews before Father gets to the altar. I know, crazy stuff. You know what they call that? Early. Yeah, that's called early. And no wonder you people are always so confused when Father starts preaching about the early Christians. Early Christian? Well, what kind of Christian is that, Father? I'm like a 5 minutes late Christian. Well, we're before the gospel Christians. Well, we're whenever we get there Christians and straight after communion Christians. There's a lot of straight after communion Christians, isn't there? Have you seen how empty the church gets straight after communion? Because all the straight after communion Christians leave. I've been studying this extensively for 3 or 4 years now, a very deep, intense academic study of the straight after communion Christians. I've been trying to understand the psyche of the straight after communion Christians. I've been trying to pinpoint the origin of the straight after communion Christians. I want to know who the leader and the founder of the straight after communion Christians is. I came to a very, very important discovery recently in the scriptures, and I discovered who it is and who started it and where it came from, because best I can tell, the only person who left the Last Supper early was Judas. He is the founder of the straight after communion Christians. He is the leader of the straight after communion Christians. Anyway, you'll be early. You'll open up your journal. You'll say, all right, God, I tried everything else. Show me one way in this mass I can become a better version of myself this week. And then you'll listen. Every relationship improves when we listen. Every relationship improves when we listen. You'll listen to the music, the readings, the quiet of your heart, the preaching. You'll listen. And that one thing, it'll strike you. It's not like you'll be sitting there thinking, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe that was the one thing, but maybe that wasn't the one thing. I mean, and he said I could only have one thing, so if I take this one thing now, there might be a better one thing later, and then I won't be able to get that one thing because I took this one thing. The Holy Spirit doesn't work that way. That one thing, it'll strike you. You write it down on its own page. You'll date it. You spend the rest of the Mass praying about how you can live that one thing this week. You come home from church on Sunday, focused, energized, invigorated. You think to yourself, this thing works. I'm going to do this every Sunday for the rest of my life. So you think to yourself, so I better put this journal in a safe place. Chuck it in the back seat. Now, you put it in some drawer. You don't open the drawer for 3 years. 3 years from next Sunday, you open the drawer. You think, gee, there's that journal. Start to flick through it. You think, gee, I've only used 2 pages of this journal. Think, gee, it's a nice journal. I wouldn't want to waste it. That's all right. I got an idea. I just ripped those 2 pages out, and now it's like a brand new journal. Our lives change when our habits change. When do our lives change? Our lives change when our habits change. Imagine every single person in your parish coming to church on Sunday with a mass journal looking for the one way they could become a better version of themselves. Imagine the energy, the enthusiasm. Imagine the conversation you have with your spouse, your kids, your friends, your pastor. Take it a step further. Imagine every Catholic in Michigan coming to church on Sunday with a mass journal looking for the one way they could become a better version of themselves. And take it one step further than that. 67 million Catholics in America. Imagine 67 million Catholics in America coming to church on Sunday with a mass journal, looking for the one way they could become a better version of themselves. That's a game changer. We need a game changer. The tide on American Catholicism is going out. We need a game changer. Business as usual is not going to get the job done. Where is the game changer going to come from? The problem is we've become hypnotized by complexity. Hypnotized by complexity, overwhelmed by complexity, because there's so much to Catholicism. It's so beautiful, it's so rich, it's so deep, there's so much genius there. We become hypnotized by complexity. And the truth is, a mass journal in the hands of every Catholic in America is a game changer. That one simple habit is a game changer. Why? Because it teaches us to listen to the voice of God in our lives. And when we listen to the voice of God in our lives, incredible things begin to happen. Get yourself a mass journal. 67 million Catholics in America. That's a sleeping giant. I'd like to wake that giant up. I'd like to wake that giant up. The two things I want you to take away from here today. Number one, I want you to get to confession once a month. Use that as a spiritual training ground. Number two, I want you to get a mass journal. Once you get a mass journal, start using the mass journal. You do those two things for 6 months, then send me an email. Tell me if it hasn't changed your life. Tell me if it hasn't changed your life. And if you want more dynamic Catholics in your parish, in your diocese, in your state, in your country, and you're bold enough to get involved in this Christmas initiative, I want you to send me an email and say, hey, I want to do this book thing for my parish. I want to get these books into the hands of people in my parish this year. We've got to become continuous learners. 1% of American Catholics read a Catholic book last year. 1% of American Catholics read a Catholic book last year. The average evangelical read 3.5 books last year. That's 350% compared to our 1%. We've got to become continuous learners. We've got to start reading great Catholic books. We've got to start asking the big questions. God, what do you think I should do? God, show me one way in this Mass I can become a better version of myself this week. We've got to start building that bigger future. What's the biggest Catholic church in your city? Think about it. What's the biggest Catholic church in your city? St. Paul's? St. Mary's? St. Catherine's? No. Biggest Catholic church in your city, probably doesn't matter what city you come from, is some evangelical, non-denominational church. There are more Catholics attending some non-denominational evangelical church in your city than the biggest Catholic church in your city. We've got to do something about that. It's time to get them back. It's time to get them home. I love being Catholic, and I love the church, and I've spent, as I said, almost 2 decades now traveling the world, speaking to people about the genius of Catholicism. And in my travels, I've become absolutely convinced of 3 things. Number one, there's nothing wrong with Catholicism that can't be fixed by everything that's right with Catholicism. Number two, if you and I are not part of the solution, we are part of the problem. And number 3, if 67 million Catholics in America stepped it up a notch, something incredible would happen. So let's step it up a notch. God bless you.
Hi, this is Matthew Kelly. There's genius in Catholicism. Unfortunately, not everybody sees it that way. That's why things like these CDs from Lighthouse Catholic Media are so powerful, so important to the development of our faith, because they give us answers to the questions. They encourage us in our spiritual journey. You've been listening to a presentation I gave in 2010. Now we're going to go back more than a decade to a presentation I gave in 1999 about the pressures that exist in our culture and how much challenge it is to really live a spiritual life in the midst of the modern world. God bless you, and don't forget, be bold, be Catholic. Thank you. Thank you, you're very kind. Once upon a time, there was a young man, and his birthday was coming round. It was about a month away, and he came to his father and he said, "Dad, you know, I really like a new car for my birthday. Yeah, it's about a month away. I thought I'd come and talk to you about it, see if it would be all right." And his dad said, "Well, you're only going to be 18.
And he said, yeah, but Dad, I really like a new car, and I'll do anything you want, just let me know. Well, his father says, well, now that you mention it, there are one or two things. All right, I'll do your deal. If you do these 3 things for me, a month from now, I'll buy you a new car. The first thing is, you got to get a haircut. This kid's got this long hair, down past his shoulders. He says, you've got to get a haircut. And the second thing is, you've got to get rid of that earring. It's got to go. And the third thing is, I want you to read the Bible every night for 10 or 15 minutes before you go to bed. I'll get you a new Bible. You can read the Bible 10 or 15 minutes. If you can do all that for the next month, then I'll get you a new car for your birthday. And a couple of weeks goes by, and the kid starts to read the Bible before he goes to bed every night, and he sort of quite enjoys it. About a week before his birthday, he comes to his father and he said, Dad, it's going to be my birthday next week. I was thinking, isn't it time we sort of go down to the dealership, pick out the right color, make sure they got the one I want, and that sort of thing. And his dad said, well, yeah, it's probably a good idea, but, I thought we had a deal. I thought you were going to get a haircut, and I thought you were going to get rid of the earring, and I thought you're going to read the Bible, for 10 or 15 minutes every day. And the boy said, Dad, he takes the earring out on the spot. He says, the earring's gone. You'll never see it again. His father says, well, that's good, but what about the long hair? And what about reading the Bible? He says, Dad, I've been reading the Bible 10 or 15 minutes every night. Every night. Well, that's really good. That's really good. But, well, what about the long hair? When are you going to get the haircut? He says, Dad, like I said, I've been reading the Bible every night, and that Bible you gave me, it's got pictures in it. And I'm looking at the pictures, and Jesus, he's got this long hair. It's like down past his shoulders, like much worse than mine, Dad. And I figured if it's all right for Jesus, it's all right for me. His dad smiles to himself. He says, yeah, you're right, son, but, if you read a little closer and a little further, you'll discover that Jesus walked everywhere he went. And I think the first thing we need to do on a day like today is assess where we are. We talked about point A, point B last year. Do you remember that? Yes or yes? Good. We talk about where are we? What have we done? What are we doing? What are we doing? We need to take a look at this at 2 levels. Firstly, personal level. Secondly, cultural level. We have taller buildings, but shorter tempers. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy it less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less common sense, more knowledge, but less judgment, more experts, but more problems, more medicine, but less wellness. We drink too much, spend too recklessly, laugh too little, drive too fast, get too angry too quickly, stay up too late, get up too tired, read too seldom, watch TV too much, and pray too little. We have multiplied our possessions, but reduced our values. We've learned how to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, but not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We've conquered outer space, but not inner space. We've done larger things, but not better things. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted the soul. We write more, but learn less. We plan more, but accomplish less. We've learned to rush, but not to wait. We have higher incomes, but lower morals. More food, but less appeasement. More acquaintances, but fewer friends. These are the times of world peace, but domestic warfare. More leisure and less fun. More kinds of food and less nutrition. These are the days of 2 incomes, but more divorce. Of fancier houses, but broken homes. These are the days of quick trips, throwaway morality, one-night stands, overweight bodies, and pills that do everything from quiet to cheer to kill. The world is in one awful mess. Our culture has created this mess. It's too busy, it's too noisy, there's too much going on in our lives, and the reality is that it is affecting our lifestyles. We live in an age of crisis. It's a cultural crisis, and it's a personal crisis. The cultural crisis is causing the personal crisis. And the call of every Christian is to be countercultural. And we have forgotten that. The call of every Christian is to step out of the culture, is to step against the tide, is to swim against the tide, is to walk against the current, and to say, there's more to life. Let's step back. There's more to life than increasing the speed. Bigger isn't always better. Larger isn't always the answer. More isn't always the answer. Life is not a popularity contest. It's not a competition to see who can collect the most toys. Life is not a fashion parade. There's more to life. And that's what we come here for today, is to discover, is to step back. Because, if I take my hand and I put it right up against your eyes here, what can you see? Nothing. But if I take my hand, I put it here, what do you see? You see it's a hand. And if I step back here, you see that the hand is connected to a body, that there's more. But very often we're walking around in life like this. We're bumping into things, we're falling over people, we're hurting ourselves, we're creating, we're adding to the culture. We're adding to the self-destructive culture that is being created in our lives just because we're walking around blindfolded. And what God is continually calling us to do is to step back and say, hey, it's a hand. And there's more than just a hand. There's a bigger reality. There's a whole person. And there's a whole world out there. And to begin to look at things from a different perspective. And that's what we come to a day like this for. To get a new perspective. To get a grip of what our priorities are. To get a grip of what our priorities should be. To discover a deeper meaning and purpose in life than the pursuit of material things. Than the pursuit of pleasure. There's more to life. We spoke last year about point A, point B. We said that point A represents where we are right now, with our faults, our failings, our flaws, our defects, our talents, our abilities, our potential. Point A. And that point B represents where we're being called to, where we become perfect. Not perfect in the robotic sense, not perfect in the sense that we all become the same, but perfect in the sense that at point B, I become perfectly who God created me to be. At point B, you become perfectly who God created you to be. At point B, there's an intimate relationship between our legitimate needs, our deepest desires, and our talents. Because I believe that God speaks to us through these voices. Legitimate need, deepest desire, and talent. To understand it, we have legitimate needs. If you do not eat, you will die. You have legitimate needs. Physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. We have dreams, we have ambitions, we have desires. I believe God speaks to us through these, but not in the shallow ones, in the deep desires of our hearts. Like for example, I probably desire to have 6 double chocolate donuts for lunch today, But it's not really a deep desire. A deeper desire is that I desire to be healthy, I desire to be well, I desire well-being. And so the deeper desire, God is speaking to me in the deeper desire. Legitimate need, deepest desire, and talent. What are our gifts? What are our abilities? Because I believe that these 3 things intimately linked create something really extraordinary in a human person. I believe that God gives us desires, I believe He gives us talents, and that when the desires and talents mix together, that something wonderful takes place. Something extraordinary. We see that in the lives of great men and women throughout history, and the heroes, the leaders, the champions, the legends, the saints. Extraordinary connection between legitimate need, deepest desire, and talent. The distance between point A and point B we call the path of salvation, or the journey of the soul. And this journey is achieved by continually visualizing the better person we know we can be and struggling to become that better person. For a moment, close your eyes, everyone. Don't fall asleep. I know there's 1 or 2 people sleeping out there. Close your eyes. Ask yourself, in what one way can I become a better person today? In what one way can I become a better person today? Okay, now open your eyes. Does everyone have one way? Yes or yes? How long did it take? 3 seconds? That's the power of prayer, to come to this place and say to ourselves, in what way can I become a better person today? In what way can I become more like Jesus Christ today? And then to go out with that practical resolution and struggle to change and to grow and to become that better person. Last year we said to you, how long do you have to sleep in your garage before you become a car? And someone said 5 years, but they were wrong. The reality is you could sleep in your garage forever and you never become a car. Going to church doesn't make you any more Christian than sleeping in your garage will make you a car. It's about this journey. It's about changing. It's about growing. It's about developing. Life is between these two banners. Life exists between these two banners. Everything outside of these two banners, at the very best, is a waste of time. This is life. How do we know? Well, if we look at the four major aspects of the human person: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Physically, if you eat the right sorts of food and you exercise regularly and you get regular sleep, how do you feel? You feel good, right? You feel great. Why? Because physically, you're changing, you're growing, you're developing. Physically, you're becoming the better person you know you can be. Physically, you are making this journey. Emotionally, you fall in love. How do you feel? Doesn't sound like you have much experience out there. You fall in love. How do you feel? Why? Because your heart's expanding. You begin to look at someone else. You begin to look to bring someone else happiness rather than just yourself. Emotionally, you're changing, you're growing, you're developing. Emotionally, you're making this journey. Emotionally, you're becoming the better person you know you can be. Intellectually, if you learn new things, how do you feel? You feel more vibrant, you feel more vital, you feel more alert, you feel more aware. Why? Because intellectually, you are changing, you are growing, you are developing. Intellectually, you're becoming the better person you know you can be. Spiritually, you have a moment, a spiritual moment, an encounter. And it's maybe not in a church, it's maybe not even in prayer. Maybe it's when your daughter graduates from college, or when your daughter gets married, or when your son, makes the football team or scores a touchdown. You just have a moment of just sheer peace and sheer exhilaration. And in some way you just feel so close to God in that moment. And in that moment, you feel like the whole world could fall down and everything would be all right. Why? Because your spirit is expanding. Spiritually, you're changing, you're growing, you're developing. Spiritually, you're becoming the better person you know you can be. You're making this journey. This journey is life. This journey is life. And so what we need to do today is to begin to think about what things lead us along the journey and what things prevent us from making this journey. What things stop us from making this journey? Well, lots of things stop us from making this journey. I'd say that the number one thing is fear. Fear. We're fearful of the journey. We build ourselves a little white picket fence, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. We put a little white house in the middle of the picket fence. We say, yeah, I can live here. I'm not really happy, but I'm not miserable, and a lot of people are worse off than me. I can be all right here, this is all right, And we can't be. The human being thrives on change, on growth, on development. We just saw that in the four major areas of life. The human being thrives on change, on growth, on development. What holds us back is fear. What is the thing that Jesus says most common in the Gospels? He says, do not be afraid. He says, do not be afraid. He says it over and over and over again. God says it throughout the Old Testament. Jesus says it throughout the New Testament. Why? Because he senses that we are. He senses that we are afraid. He wants to call us out of that fear because he knows that beyond the fear of that hand, beyond the fear that's holding us in like that hand is a whole world. He doesn't want us locked up here. He wants to set us free. He wants to set us free and bring us onto this journey, this exciting adventure, which is life. Fear is one thing that holds us back. What else holds us back? Once upon a time, there was a young boy, a young Native American Indian boy. And in his tribe, the custom was to send the young men out into the wilderness at the age of 15 to fend for themselves. And so the young man, he set off on his journey, and after 30 days, all the men in the tribe would come and find him in the wilderness and bring him back and initiate him into the tribe, to full adulthood. So he began to wander in the wilderness, and for the first few days, there was no problems. There was plenty of food. There was no wild animals, and he found comfortable places to sleep. And everything, for the most part, was fine. But about the 6th or the 7th day, food became scarce. And on the 8th day, the young man, he found no food at all, and he went to bed hungry that night. And on the 9th day, he found no food either. The 10th and the 11th and the 12th. The 13th day, he hadn't eaten for several days. He was starving. And he came to a mountain. And he looked up the mountain and he thought to himself, perhaps if I wander up that mountain, somewhere on the mountain, I will find some food. And so the boy, he began to wander up the mountain. And as he wandered up the mountain, he discovered a path, and he began to follow the path to the top of the mountain. And as he got to the top of the mountain, he still had found no food. And so he became a little discouraged. And right towards the summit of the mountain, a rattlesnake came across the path in front of him. And the boy saw the rattlesnake, and the rattlesnake saw the boy. And they stood head to head and stared at each other for a long moment. And then the snake said to the boy, "Boy, I'm lost up here in the mountain. I cannot find my way down. I know that you know the way down the mountain. Please, will you show me my way to the bottom of the mountain?" And the boy said, "No, I know what you are. You're a rattlesnake, and at any moment you could strike out and bite me, and I would fall to the ground. You could even kill me." And the snake said, "Boy, you look very hungry." And the boy said, "Oh, I am hungry. I haven't eaten for many days." And the snake said to the boy, "Boy, if you lead me down the mountain, I will lead you to food in return." And the boy said, "No, I know what you are. You're a rattlesnake, and at any moment you could strike out and bite me, kill me." And the snake said, "Boy, if you lead me down the mountain, I promise you I will lead you to food, and I promise you I will not hurt you." And the boy said to the snake, "Do you promise?" And the snake said, "I do." And so the boy began to lead the snake down the mountain. And when they got to the bottom of the mountain, the snake led the boy to food, all types of food. And the boy ate and he drank and he felt like a king. The snake danced, and the boy watched the snake dance, and the snake was so beautiful when it danced. And then the boy decided he would like to dance, so the boy danced and the snake danced, and they ate some more and they drank some more and they partied into the night, and the boy felt like king of the world. Then all of a sudden the snake struck out and bit the boy, and the boy fell to the ground in the most intense pain, and he screamed and he cried, and the snake slithered over to the boy, and the boy looked at the snake, and the snake looked at the boy, and the boy screamed at the snake. He said, you promised you wouldn't hurt me." And the snake looked calmly into the boy's eye, and he said, "You knew what I was when you picked me up." Question: what is it in your life that sooner or later is going to turn on you and strike you down? What is it in your life that sooner or later is going to turn on you and strike you down? Because, my dear friends, we all have rattlesnakes. We all have rattlesnakes. They back us up into that corner and they prevent us from making this journey. Maybe you want to go up and speak to one of the priests today about some of your rattlesnakes. They stop us from making this journey. What else stops us from making this journey? Well, lots of things. We can't talk about them all, but another thing is social diseases. Social diseases. I believe the most prominent social disease of our age is something I call minimalism. Minimalism. What is minimalism? Minimalism is when people say to themselves, what is the least I can do and still keep my job? What is the least I can do and keep my parents off my back? What is the least I can do and still get through this class in school? What is the least I can do and keep my spouse from nagging me? What is the least I can do and still get into heaven? What is the least I can do? What is the least I can do? Minimalism is destroying our culture. Minimalism is destroying the world. Minimalism is destroying our souls. Minimalism is destroying the church. Why? Because it is not the attitude of Christ. It is not the attitude of Christ. And not only that, if you dissect the history books, If you dissect the history books and you take out everyone great in history, the heroes, the leaders, the champions, the saints, these people are not minimalists. Their lives are not characterized by this question, what is the least I can do? If you look to the people of great achievement in our own age, whether it be Mother Teresa or Bill Gates or Michael Jordan, regardless of what field they succeed in, the question that characterizes their lives is this: what is the most I can do? What is the most I can do? And if you add that one question to your inner dialogue, if you allow that question to become a constant part of your inner dialogue, your life will change. If you begin to ask yourself throughout the day, what is the most I can do? Your life will change. And you will become like the heroes, the leaders, the champions, the saints that fill our history books. And you will become more like Christ, because the attitude of Christ is, what is the most I can do? Minimalism, there's no place for minimalism in the church. There's no place for minimalism in our lives if we choose to be followers of Jesus Christ. We must begin to ask ourselves, what is the most I can do?